I was very intimidated by the idea of alternative tunings. It took me the longest time really to get into them because I was trained as a classical guitarist, and then I became a rock guitarist in my sort of teenage, and early 20s. And it was still very much the time of playing in standard tuning, Ritchie Blackmore, people like that people weren't really tuning down like the sort of death metal bands started to do with drop C and adding extra strings and things like that. So it took me a while. I started playing in folk clubs and started to get interested, but then what I found was I'd find a different tuning and I'd tune my guitar to it and I couldn't be bothered to tune it back, and it would be in that tuning for ages, and then eventually I'd tune it back and then I didn't want to go back, So I think the first thing to think about with alternative tuning is practice tuning backwards and forwards, because you'll need to do that, and especially if you're doing it live, unless you're touring with 5 guitars all tuned differently, then you're going to need to be good at that. And secondly, it means that you don't just get stuck in one tuning. I'll often start writing a tune and then gradually go, I can't do this without, so I'm going to just change this tuning and find a tuning that suits what I'm doing. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, some people will actually go so far with it, I think Michael Hedges used to do this, where they'll actually change the gauges of their strings to suit the tuning. So, and Nashville tuning is an example of this, where you've actually got the 6, 5, 4 strings, the 3 deepest strings, actually an octave higher. So you can play the same chord shapes, but you'll get a very different jangly sound, and obviously you can't do that with the same gauges. So before you get into that, and that's not something I really do, even though I do play 7th string, and that has a significantly deeper 7th string, I don't do that because I like to really just have 1 or 2 guitars. Okay, so the second thing is to go bit by bit. So the most obvious alternative tuning, the tuning that most people know, is just drop D. So all you're doing is you're taking the thickest string down to D, so that you've got, that's the D string, that's the A string, and then you're just dropping it down a tone, 2 frets worth. And it's normally, you can just hear, that's the octave, and you can even hear that it's an octave lower. You can also use the harmonic and hear that the 12th harmonic on the thickest string should ring with the D string. Okay, so that just is called drop D tuning, and actually you can do an awful lot with that. And actually Bert Jansch used it a lot. People always assume Bert Jansch was in DADGAD all the time, and it's this famous thing that, Jimmy Page covered. It was actually written by Bert Jansch, that riff, and Jimmy Page did play it in DADGAD, but Bert Jansch didn't, because he does all this. All that kind of stuff, which is all in just natural tuning apart from the D string. So there's a lot that you can do with that. And you don't have any sort of issues with intonation, meaning that when you play the 7th fret on the thickest string, it's going to be an A, just as it would be on the D string. When you tune down further than that, sometimes you'll find that the notes are not quite in tune. If the string is really baggy, that's what's going to happen. But I'll talk about that a bit more. So, okay, so from drop D, since I last played that, is what's called double drop D. So double drop D, we're just going to take thinnest D string down to D. Yeah? So now we've got D, D, D. And the thinnest D string, that's in the 1st string, I've just played the 3rd fret on the B string, and I've got the same note there. Double drop D, which also makes a great difference, when you're doing this kind of you're doing these kind of you know, picking patterns on the bottom 3 strings with using the open D just gives it a different vibe. And I think I did a thing, Sugar is Poison, I think I played in this tuning. Yeah. And it doesn't make a huge difference, but when you hear these harmonics, it means that you've got the D ringing with the B and the G, so you've got this kind of G sounding chord there rather than having an E minor sounding chord. Okay, so now you've got 3 Ds, so you can still really think about it if you know what scale you're playing in. As long as you know that scale on the D string, you know, you've got it on 3 different strings, so it's very easy to sort of not get lost in, like, oh, I'm in an alternative tuning, my guitar's gone crazy, I don't know where I am. Suddenly I'm using the same shapes on all those 3 strings. You probably see me do. I'm just using the same frets. Very handy for your sort of modern acoustic guitar technique. Now, you're just hop-skipping away now from DADGAD, the famous DADGAD, which is a life-changing tuning for most people. Most people discover DADGAD and then their guitar is in DADGAD for weeks. And they've written a whole other album, a lot of eco sticks. Actually, my first solo guitar album was written in DADGAD. So you get there by just playing the 2nd fret on the G string and taking the B string down to A. So a few interesting things happen now. One is you've got 2 A strings, hopefully. Thickest A string and what was the B string, yeah, the 2nd string. So it takes a little while to get that one because the B string is suddenly a bit floppy. It's sometimes hard to get it quite in tune. But you've got yeah, so the 2 interesting things that happen is, one, you've got the 2 A strings, so you can remember where you are, plus you've got the 3 D strings. Now if you own Echo Sticks, my album, you would recognise some of these little sounds that I'm making here from that. Okay, so we've gone D, drop D, double drop D, DADGAD. Now another thing that I like to do is, while we're in DADGAD, is I'll just take the A string down to G. So again, you're just dropping the A string down, and you'll notice I tend to be going down. I don't tend to tune any strings up from natural tuning. The only time I do that is with open C, which I won't talk about today in this video. So from DADGAD, we're just going to take the A string down to G. So again, it's just going down a tone. So if you get used to just the sound of your string going down a tone, and it rings with the G. So now we've got D, G, D, G, A, D. And I've used this heaps. Now the other interesting thing is, now that the A string and the B string, and this is the same with DADGAD, they're now at the same relationship to each other as they would have been in standard tuning, you know, so. So if I imagine when I'm on those 2 strings I'm in E, but I'm playing the D in the bass. And then the G gives me a chance of another sort of progression that wouldn't be easy while I was up here. Big fan of that tuning. I don't really know what to call it. It's DADGAD with the A string down to G. Now, while we're down there, the next thing that we can look at is open G. So open G, we're just going to put the A string back to B. So now, well, I mean, we've got there from DADGAD, but what we could have done is just gone, we've got double drop D, so we've got 3 D strings, the G and the B are standard, and we drop the A string down to G. We've got open G, which again I actually use a lot. Keith Richards is very famous for having used this, and a lot of slide guitarists. I'm looking around for something I can slide with, but I just have to imagine, because you've got the one, you've basically got a G chord, but you've got this D in the bass. And Keith Richards used to take off one of his strings. I'm not sure which one, but hopefully I'm still intact enough to be able to manage to just not play the string I didn't want to play. But there we are. Okay, so open G, very, very useful. And you'll notice that on I think my most popular tune, Ambient Guitar for the Soul 1.5 Hours, the handy, catchy little title, I'm actually in open G, but what I've done is drop the thickest D string, or was the thickest D string, all the way, no I didn't actually, because I used my 7th string, I dropped it all the way down to B, but I actually created this tuning by dropping this string all the way down to B. So, on the G string, that's going to be the 4th fret on the 5th string, which used to be the A string. Now it's a G string, so the B is on the 4th fret. Now as you can hear, that is floppy. And the problem that you can have with this string is, if you're just doing it with standard gauge strings on, you know, I'm playing on the 7th fret on the what is now a B string, that should be an F sharp. Oh, it's a little bit sharp, yeah, because unless your strings are quite thick, it's hard to get the intonation exactly right. So you have to think very carefully about what you do on this floppy string, you know. This is where the 7th string came in useful, because I had a really thick string and then the intonation didn't seem to matter. So actually, before I wrote that very catchily named thing, I wrote another thing. How did I used to do that? Which was in this tuning of open G with a very, very low B. And I created something I was attempting to do 4 against 3, so I'd kind of do this one. It's kind of Michael Hedges type thing in 3, and this was in 4, but I kind of just grooved it up a little bit to called Natty Kran. And then I think I got into, so I'm not going to remember how it went there. So I'm using, so on the this thick floppy string, I'm using a harmonic, so I'm able to get those notes and they're in tune, whereas if I wanted to go, yeah, no, that's not quite in tune, that's not quite an E. But that's B an octave high. And then open strings. Natty Cran, and then from Natty Cran I tuned my 7th string. I thought, I wonder what happens if I play Natty Cran on my 7th string, and I came up with those ideas that are familiar to the nearly 1 million people that have listened to that one. So yeah, so that's a really quick guide to just finding your way through some open tunings without getting completely lost, and then my own little tunings at the end, which you might have fun with. And if you, there's actually some other views on my Patreon channel, there's some other little pieces on the Patreon channel when I teach you to play that tune a little bit more, and I talk more about alternative tunings. But hopefully that is going to get you started and get away from the fear of not fiddling around at this end with the guitar. So yeah, and practice tuning, tune back. I shall now spend the next half an hour trying to get my guitar back into standard. See you next week.